Well, it'll take a while, but once it starts, it'll be pretty good. But it's a long-term investment and not something for people out there. Don't just rush into that for sure. If you're not committed to do it for a long time, you're just going to be burning your money.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. I have this little sticky note right here that says standardize before you optimize. One of the things I'm most proud about our law firm is we have like the best standards and operating procedures and the best practice management software that is like dialed. Everything is like the best, in my opinion, that I have seen. And so we have the ability to scale. And if you don't have that and all of a sudden you do some marketing project that like works really well now you have a bunch of other problems. And so I just think that whole making sure that your operations are in order, and every time you've got an issue that comes up, it's a blessing because it's another problem to fix so that you can move forward. At least that's how we try to do it.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. Today, we're going to be talking to a Colorado personal injury lawyer named Keith Fuicelli. And he's got a really interesting, I'll say, story, very sort of scary story from the outside. And so we're going to dive into that and how it's affected his career and all that. So you need to stick around and listen to this story for sure. So Keith, welcome to the show. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your firm, where you're located, sort of maybe how many attorneys, that sort of thing.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me on the show. Glad to be here. My name's Keith Fuicelli, and along with my law partner, John Lee, we have a Denver-based PI law firm, really do cases throughout Colorado. We've got 7 lawyers total, about 25 support staff. So kind of in that small, I would say medium size, or kind of creeping into the medium size law firm, but we are pretty aggressive on our advertising. So we do a lot of mass media. So we do have billboards and are about to go on TV. Our thing is, we have the 4s in Colorado, which is kind of a big deal. Our phone number, 303-444-4444. So it's nice to have a single digit repeater. And been in business now going on 16, 17 years and loving it so far.
Well, cool. So we'll just dive into that. I usually save some of this for later, but since you talked about that, so you're getting into you've done some advertising, billboards at least, getting into more advertising. Did you do that from the beginning, or is that something that sort of evolved over time? It's
definitely evolved over time because, the cost point is so high and it's such a long play when you're trying to brand. And if any of your listeners know Denver, it's as competitive as any market in the PI space. So every billboard seems like it's a PI lawyer, every TV commercial PI lawyer. So it's very competitive. And so the mass media stuff is all relatively new, frankly.
Yeah, Atlanta, where I am, is like that.
Yeah.
It's funny when, Georgia is now a battleground state. I don't know if Colorado is. So election year from summer to November, all my PI attorney clients, they can't afford to get on the air because all the political ads have covered it up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely when you're in a market like this, it can be so intimidating, but we started from the ground up, really working referrals and just trying to do a really good job and build that referral network, and then would slowly start to do more mass media type stuff. And I don't know, I figure it's like grow or die, right? I mean, in this business, at least that's the philosophy we have.
All right. So we're going to dive into that a little more, but I want to go back to the beginning, man. So,
okay. Got it.
So my understanding is that when you got out of law school, you started out in DA's office. Is that right?
Yep. I worked at DA's office for almost 5 years.
So did you always know you wanted to be a trial lawyer and that's why you went that route, or tell me about that?
Yeah, I always knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer. And it was frustrating when I graduated law school because I was like middle of the class at CU and couldn't get an interview. I wanted the big, here at 17th Street, the big law firm, the big money. Nobody would give me the time of day. And so luckily I had an internship at the DA's office, and that morphed into a job offer. So it's like you get paid in money, you get paid in experience, and there you get paid with a ton of experience. So definitely knew that's what I wanted to do, and always knew I really wanted to do plaintiff's work. So at some point I had been there long enough, had tried enough cases, I figure, all right, I'm ready to get out.
So yeah, that's the thing, I'm always curious about the folks that sort of know what they want to do going in. I was sort of the same way. I've told this story, but I went into law school knowing I wanted to be a plaintiff's trial lawyer.
Yeah.
And I've never done it.
I feel really fortunate. I think I read some book about some, catastrophic case that some plaintiff's lawyer did forever ago. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's definitely what I want to do. And somehow found my way here.
Okay. So you started out at DA's office. You did that for, 5 years, probably got a buttload of trial experience, definitely probably in the court every day, I would imagine.
Yep.
And then eventually, did you make your way out to a plaintiff's firm, or did you go to maybe the dark side for a little while?
Well, actually, this is a funny story. So I had interviewed at a pretty well-known plaintiff's firm in Colorado, and I didn't get the job. I was so sad because I really wanted that job so badly, and they offered the job to somebody else. And so I had these friends that work at a big insurance defense firm, and they're like, okay, well, why don't you come interview over here? And so they got me a job over there, and I had been there like 2 months. And the partner for that other large PI firm called me up and said, hey, the person we hired didn't work out. We'd like you to come work. And I said, okay, I'll do it. So I had to go quit at a really big insurance defense firm where I was there for like 3 months. Had to quit and went over to a PI firm where I was there about 2 years. And so it's always kind of funny. And I'm now very good friends with the partner at that defense firm who hired me, that I had to quit, who then left the insurance defense firm and became a plaintiff's lawyer. So small world.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure. How was that conversation?
It was.
I know I just got here, but I'm leaving.
I know. And, I'm sure they lost money on me because I wasn't really generating any revenue at that point. But I guess, you don't realize it at the time, but not only is it a small world, but our career paths, they seem like they take a really long time, but they're, in the end, these are just like little blips of time that, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, it seems like it's a big deal, but then next thing you know, that time's passed and you're like best buds with the person. Okay.
So you were at that firm for a while. Eventually you started your own firm. How long ago was that?
So we started this firm in 2007. So it is coming up on close to 20 years. That's, again, just like I said, it's like unbelievable how much time has gone by.
Wow. So I alluded to sort of, I don't know if we call it your origin story, but a very important story in your life. I mean, it's just really incredible. I want to hear about it. So when did that happen, and why don't you tell us what happened?
Yeah, well, it kind of plays into when we started the law firm. So what happened is I was out jogging one day around City Park, a big park here in Denver, and I got hit by a car that was going 45 miles an hour. So they had to resuscitate me at the scene. Everybody thought I was dead. Went to Denver Health, where they saved my life. And I don't remember any of this, by the way. This is what happened. I was there for 2 weeks, and then I spent almost 2 months at Craig Hospital, which just had a profound impact on my recovery. So I did suffer from a brain injury, and I've had nothing short of a miraculous recovery, in large part due to Craig Hospital. But so the funny thing was, I'd actually left that other plaintiff's firm and was sort of partnering with this one older plaintiff lawyer. And we had kind of planned to just have me sort of like eventually, run the firm or whatever. And then that happened, and he had to hire somebody to come in because I was out of work for, 6 months easy. And eventually it just wasn't working anymore. And so eventually I just knew, you know what, I just got to go start my own thing. And so it was at that point that reached out to John Lee, and we decided we were going to start our own firm, and off we went.
So, man, getting hit by a car, man, that's intense. So I want to sort of unpack that a little bit and sort of put it in context of what was going on in your life. So
Sure.
Were you married? Did you have kids when this happened?
So I was engaged, and that created its own set of problems because like they wouldn't tell my fiance at the time. It was a crazy story. I'll just tell a little bit more of the story, because if any of your listeners know Denver, City Park is right in the middle, and next to City Park is 17th Avenue, which is, 2-lane road in each direction. It's a big road. And so my fiance at the time had gone to the store to get groceries, and she comes home and is cursing my name because I'm not helping unload the groceries. And she doesn't understand what's going on. Well, she looks down because you could see the road and realizes the road is closed. And she's like, wait, what? So she walks down, road is closed on both ends, police, fire everywhere. And she goes up to some policeman and is like, what happened? And the policeman's like, somebody got hit by a car and we don't think he made it or something like that. And she's like, the light bulb goes off and she's like, holy shit, that's my husband, even though we weren't married. And then eventually, goes to Denver Health, where when she got to Denver Health, they were like, well, we can't let you see him until you meet with the social worker first. And so can you imagine what is going through? And then, when she finally comes in, sees my feet and realizes it's me, well, I'm intubated. I'm on life support. I'm in a medically induced coma. Nobody knows anything at that point. And so that's the way it kind of was. And then it's just a little bit of improvement. And and I had a bunch of orthopedic injuries too. So, broke my hip, broke my legs, it was a big deal.
I mean, really big deal. So frame it up for me in terms of your job. I want to make sure I understand that. So you had left the other firm and you were did you have your own firm? Or were you sort of just affiliated with this guy? How did that work?
No, I did not have my own firm at that time. I was just kind of an affiliate, basically just an employee that was working with just a real small outfit type firm doing PI work.
And so were you paid as cases resolved? So you weren't getting a paycheck?
No, I was on salary and I would get a kick, if I was working on stuff, I'd get paid, and he paid me. He's a wonderful human being. And he paid me my salary the entire time for, it was about a year before we finally parted ways. So I'm getting some of my math wrong because the accident was in 07. We started this firm in 08, not 07. So yeah, it was about a full year before I finally felt like I was, back ready to practice law fully. And we decided it was best to split ways.
I tell people solos mainly, I call it a hit by the bus plan, and I mean, this is exactly what it's for. And it's, for the folks out there that have their own firm, that they're sort of the sole attorney there.
Yeah.
If something happens to them, how do you swoop in and sort of triage the practice? Luckily, you weren't in that situation. You were with this other guy and he, paid your salary. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Incredible. But yeah, I mean, this thing could happen in an instant. I mean, you don't even remember it. I mean,
yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a good point. I'm glad that you speak to people about having sort of that contingency plan. Because, bad things happen all the time. And luckily, he was paying the salary, helped pay the bills. I had good health insurance, thank goodness. I had killer health insurance, and that made a huge difference also.
So what was we don't have to get into all the detail, but what was sort of the recovery like? How long till you were really back at it, practicing law full time? How long did that take?
So that's a great question. It really took, I would say, 6 months. And I thought I could go back, but then I tried to read a case and it was literally reading Greek. And I knew that I just was not there yet. And so I was answering the phone, scanning mail, just doing administrative type stuff. And then, it was almost every 6 months, I was okay, I'm back 100%. But then 6 months later, I'd feel better. And 6 months later, I'd feel better. And to this day, I still am a changed person for sure, but I firmly believe and have zero doubt in my mind that I'm a much better trial lawyer now than I was before, which is kind of crazy because you can think, wow, here's somebody that gets, brain injury in the correct hospital for 2 months and now come out and I'm a better trial lawyer than I was before. That's something I would have never thought.
Well, I mean, I imagine, and I'm sure this is absolutely true, that in the line of work that you do, when you have clients that are injured, your ability to empathize with them and really tell their story to a jury, ultimately, I would imagine just is through the roof now.
I think so. I definitely, when you're talking to a jury about, what it's like to not know if you're ever going to be able to work again and that uncertainty, having lived that, I think it's that authenticity piece that jurors can sniff a mile away. So whatever it is, I definitely feel a lot more connected to jurors now than I did before.
And then when the defense attorney says, yeah, client's faking it, you're not going to have any of that, are you?
They always say that. I mean, or they rarely actually say that, because that would just be too offensive to jurors to say it. They find nicer ways to say it. But yeah, I mean, we have ways of dealing with it for sure.
Yeah, that's intense. So you start getting back into it, and then at some point you go to your now partner, John Lee, and say, hey, let's start something. So tell me about that. What sort of drove you to say, all right, now's the time, and why did you do it with the partner versus not? What was your sort of thought process?
Yeah, as far as the timing, that was kind of easy because the decision was sort of made for me in a way. Like, it was just obvious that I was either going to have to go work for somebody else or start a firm. And so it was obvious at that time I wanted to start a firm. I like the idea of having a partner because from the PI sense of it, I thought, and this was just my thinking at the time, that maybe clients are more inclined to hire a firm than a person per se. And we had different skill sets. When we started out, he was doing more criminal defense and doing some different types of cases. And I was doing, strictly PI. And as time went on, that morphed into us only doing strictly PI. But I do think, especially because I have lots of friends that are solo practitioners in the PI world, and it has lots of benefits and it has lots of negatives. I mean, the benefits are that you can potentially make more money because there's just one person, but sometimes maybe it could be lonelier when you're there. And so I don't know, it made sense to me. I've always kind of liked working with people, and I like having a partner to bounce ideas off, and our personalities mesh well together. So it's been really beneficial, I would say, for me personally, having a business partner along the way.
And you guys been together, what, 17 years?
Yeah, 17 years. Yeah.
That's a good, strong partnership for sure.
Been a long time.
All right. So, you just come off an accident, you made a salary, but you weren't really probably making the big bucks.
Yeah.
You probably did not have much of a war chest, I imagine.
True.
And a PI practice, it takes a while to monetize those cases. So what was it like going out there with not much? Or did you have a solution? Tell me about that.
No, I didn't really have a solution. I mean, I had a little bit of money saved from getting run over by the car, but I didn't use any of that money. The crazy thing is, when I look back, it's like, well, when you're used to not really making a lot of money, then it's not that hard to live on not that much money. And so, yes, some PI cases take a long time to monetize, but run-of-the-mill small car crash cases, those can monetize quickly. And so I was fortunate that I had some chiropractic friends of mine that I had worked with over the years. And if you ask for help and you're like, hey man, I'm starting this firm, I need your help, they will send you clients. And so we were able to get this small set of relatively low level PI cases. But when you're working in a windowless office, as John and I were, we were like one of those co-working spaces, windowless office, sharing when one of us was on the phone, the other person had to go sit in the hall. But when you're running on that low of costs, then if you get a $5,000 fee, it's like a big deal. And I can still remember, this is kind of a fun story. So I was lucky. I was on our listserv, and this one case had been dismissed. And basically I was able to talk to the client and get me to come in because it was wrongfully dismissed because a lawyer had messed up. So long story short is, I'm able to get the court to reopen the case. And then we settled that case for, $250,000. And so the fee on that was like, 70 something $1,000. And I still remember, it was like my birthday, and I was like talking to my dad. I'm like, Dad, oh my gosh, just made $70,000 on this case. And it was just something I will probably never forget. But I will say, we've always every single month, settled cases, signed up new cases, and it's scary. It's still terrifying to this day when I look at all the people on our Zoom calls, and when we have a lot of mouths to feed. Our overhead is insane now, but you just got to take the Indiana Jones leap of faith at some point, is what we call it.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. So I want to go back. So for your accident, were you a litigant? Did you actually file suit and go through that as a litigant and depositions and all that, or how far along did that go?
We didn't have to sue because my injuries were so bad, and there was just one insurance policy that wasn't that high that they just paid it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have over the years I've represented a number of lawyers in sort of law firm breakup cases, and we've litigated some of them pretty hard, and I've represented what I call hardened bulldog litigator types that are very at ease in litigation and in the courtroom, and without fail, every single one has always told me at the end, they're like, man, it's way different being an actual party. They're like, I have a newfound respect for my clients.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you went through that or not, but
luckily not.
Yeah. All right. So you guys start your firm. How did did you have cases when you started, or did you have to go get new cases?
I'm trying to remember. I felt like I had like one or two cases, but no, I had to go get cases, but I had this I had these like chiropractors that I'd work with. And I'm like, hey, I'm starting a law firm. And even some of the legal community would send me their declined cases. So those can be just immensely valuable. They may require more work, or sometimes the law firm sort of didn't see the value in the case, but was pretty quickly able to go out and get cases by just putting in the effort, having lunch with people, asking for reject cases, and asking for referrals. Yeah.
So tell me about that, the devalue cases, because, for those lawyers out there that want to start their firm, for a plaintiff's firm, that is a technique that folks use, an approach they use. They go to the more established firms and say, give me your throwaway cases. But I've talked to some where, sometimes you got to really polish that lump of coal into a diamond. So you said they're pretty valuable. So tell me about your thoughts on that.
Well, they can be valuable, but I think now in most states, you can either get referral fees or co-counsel the case. So I would assume, and Colorado's sort of backwards on that because we're technically not allowed to do referral fees on cases. So you have to co-counsel. Now you can like co-counsel. So it's essentially the same thing, except both law firms accept sort of like the ethical responsibility of representing the client, all that jazz. But in other states where it's just a referral fee, well, then I would think it wouldn't be hard to go to other law firms. And the thing to understand is every PI practice has a different criteria for when cases meet their acceptance standard. And so if you're willing to say, I'll take the stuff that you won't, that's below that standard, especially if you just pay them a % on the end, that's a very easy way to become busy very fast. Also, if any listener is a real true litigator and is competent at litigating cases, there are lots of PI firms that have zero interest in litigating cases for whatever reason. And so if you can get in with one of those firms, they are happy to sort of work a case up, and then for whatever reason, maybe it's denied liability or the client wants more money, whatever the reason, the case needs to go in litigation. You might end up giving away half the fee, but you could become very busy very quickly, and then you're really mining those cases for the diamonds. Because I guess the last piece of that is really understanding how valuable these cases can be is critical, and not undervaluing the cases. So then you're working through all these different coal nuggets, and you see a case that comes in with a disc injury and a young 24-year-old person with no priors, and that's a permanent injury, and it's $1 million policy. Well, that's $1 million case. So swing for the fences.
So now that you've been at it for a while, and you're like you said, you're about to really dive deep, go big on the advertising. Have you moved up the chain a little bit? So now you're referring out cases to other folks, or do you keep all those in house?
Well, we definitely. Well, for example, we don't do work comp, so we need to establish where we are co-counseling or referring out those cases because we're losing a revenue stream by just referring out those cases like we are right now. And we're in the process of trying to figure out how to monetize in some level, some of the D level. We grade our cases basically A+ through D. And if we're going to D cases are cases that are, we don't want them, but they are legitimate cases just because the juice is not worth the squeeze, frankly. So we need to figure out how to monetize referring those cases out. It's a work in progress. Like everything in this business, everything is always a work in progress. So we're working on it.
Yeah, once you think you got to figure it out, you got to figure out a whole bunch of other stuff, right?
Hey, if any of your listeners are Colorado licensed attorneys and want to chat with us, we would be happy to work out some. And it doesn't, we're talking a very small co-counsel, just something, because right now we just decline those cases and then they're just, on the internet finding whoever versus being able to refer them out or co-counsel or, do something better than what we're doing now.
So what's your role now in the firm? Are you trying cases still, or do you, do you have an active caseload?
Yes, for sure. Well, every partnership is different, but I am definitely like the trial person. I love trying cases. I try as many as I can. So yeah, I try a lot of cases, and I like to try them, with people here. Sometimes we try cases without people, but we are a true trial firm where a lot of PI firms might not be, or they might say they are, but they're not. So I personally believe that, the real value in those diamonds is you've got to be able to take it in front of a jury and get a verdict on those cases. And as soon as you do that, settlements go up, everything goes up. As soon as you prove to the insurance companies that you can mine that coal for the diamonds.
Nice. So what about your partner? What's his role, and how do you guys sort of balance each other out? And maybe also, has it changed over time? I'm just curious how the evolution of your guys' role.
Yeah, it's definitely changed over time because he still has a pretty big active caseload for sure. And it's only been recently that we are sort of defining our roles more defined. So he is really handling more of the HR personnel side, and I handle more of the trial litigation strategy side. But we both have active caseloads, and we sort of envision that as we continue to grow, those roles will become more refined.
So how many employees did you say you had? 70, 80?
No. 7
Okay.
lawyers. We have 7 lawyers,
Okay,
including John and I. So 5 other lawyers and about 25 support staff.
okay. Are you at the point where you've got sort of almost like C-level non-lawyers working in your firm yet?
Well, what do you mean by C-level, not like lawyer, or just C-level?
Non-lawyer, like COO or...
So not yet, but soon. So we are in we do have consultants, and we do have an operations manager and a firm manager. And those are 2 different roles. So sort of the office manager handles all payroll, PR, all the administrative in-house things. And we do have an operations manager who be like sort of like a COO, sort of, but not an official COO. Although I would foresee that in the future at some point.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. I think you're getting there, it sounds like. And how long have you been doing the TV advertising?
We haven't done it yet. So
you're about to start?
Yeah, we haven't even shot it yet. We're in the framing messaging phase right now. So maybe 3rd quarter, 4th quarter.
Yeah, your volume's going to be a lot higher next year. You're gonna have a lot more people.
That's what, it's funny. One of my very good friends said, you know what, the biggest problem you're going to have are people and space. So, but then I also think I don't think it's like you start going on TV and all of a sudden your caseload doubles. I think your phone calls might double, but your caseloads aren't going to double. So especially this market is so inundated we'll see. Maybe I'll come back on in a year and you can ask me the same question.
Yeah. Well, it'll take a while, but once it starts, it'll be pretty good. But it's a long-term investment and not something for people out there. You don't just rush into that for sure. If you're not committed to do it for a long time, you're just going to be burning your money.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. I have this little sticky note right here that says standardize before you optimize. Like if you do not I'll tell you right now, one of the things I'm most proud about our law firm is we have like the best standards and operating procedures and the best practice management software that is like everything is like the best, in my opinion, that I have seen. And so we have the ability to scale. And if you don't have that and all of a sudden you do some marketing project that like works really well, now you have a bunch of other problems. And so I just think that whole making sure that your operations are in order. And every time you've got an issue that comes up, it's a blessing because it's another problem to fix so that you can move forward. At least that's how we try to do it.
Real quick, thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. So let's talk about that a little bit. Everybody says, you got to get your procedures in place, but no one ever really says, how do you do it? So how did you guys go about doing it and really getting that fine tune with the procedures and also the tech? I mean, did you hire consultants? How did you guys really dial that in?
Yeah, so we did hire, I was going to make a tongue-in-cheek answer, which is trial and error, but there's a lot of truth in that. There's so much trial and error, and the technology is evolving so quickly, as we all know. For example, demands. Right now, a lot of people are outsourcing their demands, but now you're bringing AI in-house to do AI demands in-house. So that AI, I believe, has such a huge potential to impact how we operate that if you kind of got to just jump in it and see how it goes. But to answer your question, I think we always have designed our policies from the standpoint of what do I, the attorney running the caseload, need to know? And so then when you think about that, so you might think, okay, I need to know what the treatment is. I need to know what the medical bills are. I need to know what the liens are. I need to know what the coverage is. So we just sort of started with the idea of like, this is what we need to know quickly on every case, and then figured out different systems that could do that. Because nowadays there's lots of different practice management software options available to make that happen.
It's so true. I mean, it can be overwhelming, all the choices out there. But so I want to go back to your partnership. So, again, you guys have been together 17 years. And I mentioned earlier, I do a lot of law firm breakups. So I've seen, the good and the bad. I've seen firms that have been together, 35, 40 years on a handshake, and then some that are less than a year and they can't stand each other. So what do you think? What would you point to as saying sort of the keys to a good partnership, or maybe, what has worked for you guys?
So that is an awesome question because I think I have an awesome answer. And it goes back to right when we first started our partnership. I met with a lawyer friend of mine's, he was a lawyer that was probably 70 years old. And when we started partnering, I felt like I was 30. And he said, he's the same thing as you. He had seen breakups after breakups. He was like a business lawyer guy. And he's like, money always destroys the partnerships. It can never be 50-50. Has to be eat what you kill on some level. And so from the beginning, we have always had some sort of eat what you kill model. And I firmly believe that were that not the case, then otherwise resentment kicks in. Because no matter what, somebody's going to resent the other person for whatever reason. So my only 2 cents, and it has held true, is never make it 50-50. It has to always somehow be eat what you kill. And you can build in all the different, you're going to get credit for this referral, or you do this, there's ways to come up with whatever formula works. But in my opinion, I don't think it can ever be 50-50 or whatever.
Yeah, I'm with you. For the firms that just pay out based on how much you own, how much equity you own, it can work for a while, but you're right, the resentments can pile up. My view is, a full eat what you kill is probably not the best either. It's sort of a little bit of both, and how you weight it, it can vary. But yeah, that's interesting. So what about like when you guys disagree on stuff, just like the vision of the firm or hiring a certain person or stuff like that? How do you guys talk through that and make those decisions?
It's hard for me to think of any that come to mind. I don't know what that means, but I can't really think of any that were sort of, probably because, I think it's because we both accept that failure is 100% part of the process, and that you're going to make a million wrong decisions along the way. And so I think anytime there's an issue of whether to do something or not, we're going to err on the side of doing it. And then if it doesn't work, then you're like, okay, we made many mistakes along the way, but then we've made some smart decisions. So.
Yeah, like for example, this TV investment that you guys are about to make. That's a big dollar investment, and you both have to be on board with that. So it sounds like you are, and you're both just like, let's do it. Or were there any second thoughts or any?
So it is interesting, and we've been doing billboards now for, I feel like, over a year, and the cost, which are very expensive. The quarterly cost for billboards is probably not too far off from the quarterly cost of a TV campaign. And now we have non-equity partners at the firm too. And so I feel like it was harder to convince them that going on TV is the right move for lots of probably obvious reasons. But at the end of the day, it's John and I's firm. And so we're like, well, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens. And we know it's a long game. We know it's a long play. The reality is you can be the best lawyer in the world, but if people don't know about your law firm, then if you don't have the best cases to work on, then it doesn't matter. And so you can never stop marketing, whatever that looks like. And now you see sort of all of the established firms on TV. So there's this whole taboo about TV gone. I think is that true in Atlanta too? It's like the most established, it's like everybody's on TV, right?
It's wild. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Billboards, TV, radio, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
And there's new people coming in every couple months. You see a new face shows up. So, and some come and go, and some show up, and you start seeing them, and they stay around. It's interesting to watch.
Yeah, because it's very risky, and like with billboards, they're not even close to breaking even. But it's a branding play, and it's long-term branding plays. They're not for the faint of heart. I would just say that.
So let's talk about this. So yeah, the billboards and the TV, that is a longer term play, branding, all of that. So I assume your partner is pretty close in age to you, because it's one thing I've seen a decent amount of when you have a firm and there's a set of the older partners that are getting close to the end, and then you've got sort of the younger group that wants to be more aggressive and has a longer term vision or play in mind. You get into this battle because the older guys are just like, let's just coast, and then I'm gonna get out of here, and then you guys can do whatever you want. So this is a long-term play, so I assume you guys are pretty close in age.
Yeah, we are. We're like that. We're both the same age.
Yeah, so that's good too. So yeah, that makes it easy. So I want to touch on some other things. So let's talk about your marketing. We've talked about the billboards and the radio and the early days when you just went out for referrals. What's your sort of mix now? How would you describe your mix, and how do you track, I'm sure, sort of the buckets of how you get your cases? Where would you sort of
we definitely track everything. We still get a ton of cases on referrals. So luckily, we do a good job, and sort of those long-term referral networks that we kind of established over the years. So we still get a lot of referrals. We get a lot of former client referrals. So the buckets are probably, 1/3 of referrals from medical professionals, 1/3 from former clients. And then the rest is probably, Google, pay-per-clicks, SEO type stuff, Google LSAs, billboards, radio, we did radio for a while. It's very expensive. And so I would say that's kind of the breakdown of right now where cases are coming from.
So another thing you're doing, I don't know if you would consider this a marketing play or just, I don't know what you consider, but you've got a podcast too, right?
I do have a podcast. You know what? I do not think it's a marketing play, but I think it might turn into one. But because the podcast is the Colorado Trial Lawyer Connection. And what I do is I interview Colorado trial lawyers after they try a case on like what worked, what didn't work, the judge, give us insights. And it like hit me one day when I was driving into work. I'm like, this is what I want to do because I want to become better. And how do I become better other than having my friends on the podcast? And so that's how it all started, which is probably how it's a good marketing, because it wasn't about marketing. It was like, what can I do to, learn and become better? That being said, I think over time it might become that because it gives you some, credibility in the community for outsiders looking in. I think, although I'd have to ask sort of our people on this, but it does have its own webpage. And that provides links to our firm webpage. So to what extent that podcast affects the firm's SEO rankings, I don't know, but it could. It probably does. If I'm Google, I would sure want to think that like somebody like yourself that has a podcast, that's going to give you credibility in the community. So maybe you rank higher. So it's been and I really enjoy it. And the other thing I like about it is it keeps me really connected with the community. So then I see people and they're like, oh, hey, I'd love to listen to your podcast or whatever it is. So I highly recommend if anybody's thinking about it. Podcasts now are much easier to do, to launch, to put out there and to utilize in social media marketing, et cetera. And we haven't even talked about social media marketing for like getting cases, but it's a whole nother avenue there.
Yeah. On the podcast thing, I'm sort of in a similar situation as you. I started this podcast really because, I'm interested in the business of law and I'm interested in scaling my firm. And I was like, I want to talk to all these other law firm owners that have done it in the various stages along the way and learn from them. And it's sort of a way for me to learn. Yeah. And then everybody else just gets to listen and learn too. So let's talk about social media. What kind of stuff do you guys do on social media? I
don't know. I mean, I feel like, they say like comparison is the death of joy. And I feel like that every time I look on social media and I see what other people are doing. We actually have our entire employee in-house that is like marketing does our social media posts, does, our t-shirts and all that component of it. But it can work really effectively, it seems like, but I think it's really hard because the barriers to entry are none. And so there's going to be creative folks out there that are doing a way better job than you. So it's almost just more like top of mind awareness type of thing. I don't really feel like we get any cases from social media, or very few.
It's hard to know, and it changes so fast. They change the algorithms, and what works for a while, you got to change it. Like, I'm less active now, but I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Yeah. And LinkedIn is always tweaking their algorithm, and there's so many platforms, you can't do it all. So, I mean, you do what you can. So it sounds like you've got a person. What size were you when you actually hired a full-time in-house marketing person? I'm curious.
It wasn't that long ago. Because for a while it was like our office manager, and then we broke off, and then it was like our old office manager became our operations manager, and the marketing piece was sort of in hers. But I want to expand on that a little bit because I feel like everyone has strengths and weaknesses. And the key to success, at least in my view, is in understanding non-defensively what our own strengths and weaknesses are and those that we work with. Well, I've always been like a marketing guy. I've always had these ideas, and it comes from like, I don't know, just always. So I'm like the idea guy. And to recognize that's something that I have a little bit of proficiency in. We were able to take kind of my ideas and run with, and I could, just tell my office manager, let's do this, and it would implement them. But we're getting closer to needing a full like CMO, like a real marketing person that knows, you're talking like TV buys and all these various components. And I think we are closer to, I would say if we double in size, then we would be at that level. We would probably need a COO at that level, but we do have business consultants, and we're in business mastermind groups. Those are both new, but I think both of those are going to be hugely beneficial. I don't even remember what your question was, but hopefully I answered it.
Well, I'll tell you, for me, being in the groups and then hiring the expertise, it just accelerates everything.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing about being in the groups, I really enjoy them, but I always come away with really good feedback and good ideas, but you're always like, damn, I'm so far behind.
Yeah. I know. We just got back from a mastermind group, and it was like, oh my, the whole first day it was like drinking from a fire hose. Like, oh my gosh, so many things. And, yeah.
Yeah. So, you guys have been doing it, going strong for 17 years. So as you look back, is there any one or two or more things you can sort of say, okay, this is why we've been successful?
I think if your moral compass is headed in the right direction and you're doing things for the right reason, and that sounds cliche, but it's almost like you have to be able to look in the mirror and really understand why you're doing this. So, our firm has our core values, and it's always been something of, treating people like family. And it has to start with the client experience. If your sole mission in life is to provide your client, whatever kind of law you're in, with the best experience, the Ritz-Carlton, the Four Seasons level of experience, and that is your sole focus in life, you are going to be successful, 100%. And we've always had that as our principal aim, because then when you do that, then you have happy clients who leave reviews that you can use to do X, Y, and Z. So it just has to start with that, and everything else, I think, falls into line.
So you mentioned earlier, we've all made mistakes. You mentioned earlier you've made your share. So looking back, maybe are there any lessons learned? And the way I frame it sometimes is maybe something that you did that you shouldn't have done, or maybe something that you did but you should have done way earlier in the firm. Can you think of anything there?
Well, avoid mass torts. So just and anyone who has dabbled in mass torts, it is high risk, high reward, but very, 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 very high risk. And so you have to assume, and it's much more complicated than that, but that's just one of those things that I dabbled in that I could go back in time, I would not have done that. As far as, for us personally, I will say one of the things that we've done right all along is we've been trying cases from the very get-go. And we have always been we're not afraid to go to trial. That really does pay such dividends down the road. But as far as anything that we would have done sooner, I say this is a thing we did good. We bought our building, and we happened to buy our building. It's been 12 years ago. And there's a time, I was thinking about it, and it's to rent office space, it's going to cost you 20, 30 grand a month. But we were paying $5 grand a month to pay the mortgage down. So that's all that extra capital that can go into marketing. So I thought that was a really good decision, which at the time felt it was painful. And I was like, God, I hope we just didn't mess up. This seems like a big mistake. We actually just bought the building next door. So now we have these two places in Denver next door to each other. I guess the other, I don't know, it's when you find good people, do whatever you can to not let them go. And get rid of the toxic people, right? Hire slow, fire fast. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that kind of jumps out. Those are the main ones.
Well, you nailed it there with the people. That's huge. The best systems in the world, but if you don't have the right people, it's all going to fail.
Yeah.
It's interesting on the building too. So I had some friends that were in Denver, and so I sort of pay attention to real estate out there.
Yeah.
And man, it's exploded. So I bet you got some serious appreciation as well as saving on the rent.
Well, yeah. It's sort of almost like a retirement thing where eventually, we could sell it eventually when we want to. Same with the phone number. I talked about the phone. I will say, honestly, if you got young listeners who are thinking about doing PI and they can get a good phone number, they need to get a good phone number. It is huge. And we sort of in Denver, Colorado is really hard to get single digit repeater phone numbers because there's only 2 area codes. And we sort of, through skill and luck, were able to get the 4s. And I will tell you that we even got the 7s. So we now have 303 7s, but we're just going to hold them. We just didn't want somebody else to get them. So I just think that having an easy phone number, especially because if you're going to be relying upon former clients to send you business, well, have an easy phone number for them to remember. So that's a piece of advice I'd give people.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. So I know you got to run here in a minute, but I want to ask, so as you sit here today and you look forward to the next 10, 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
what's the vision for the firm? Where would you like it to be?
Yeah, I could see us probably quadrupling in size in that time frame, just based, getting us up to just based on cases per month. But for me personally, what I'm most excited about is how many A plus plus level, how many 8-figure verdicts we obtain. And I was going to say, how many 8-figure collectible verdicts do we obtain in the next 10 to 15 years, and maybe even a 9-figure verdict. I was just at a seminar talking to a lawyer who obtained a $200 million insurance bad faith verdict that was collectible. I mean, it's like,
Wow.
And just in Denver last week in Denver, there was a $155 million insurance bad faith verdict, fully collectible. So for me, when I talk to those lawyers that are doing that, I'm like, and it's not about, my wife sometimes is like, oh, it's not, the money is just like the measuring stick. It's not like, It's not the money. It's that's just like, for whatever reason, how we in this business equate success or not. Like, I don't know if that makes sense to you. But.
Well, it's like winning a Super Bowl. I
Yeah.
mean, what are you going to do? It's just a trophy. I mean, you can't really use it, but you still want the trophy, right?
Yes. I want that trophy to be like, yeah, I got a 9-figure verdict, yeah. So we'll keep
So
working.
it sounds like that there are some pretty big verdicts in Colorado. Sounds like, some states you don't really see many big ones, or what's considered big there is not big somewhere else. I know Georgia has been for the last several years. I mean, been having some big ones, so big that they just passed tort reform.
Did it pass? I know it was I know it's all, yeah, I know.
It did. I tell you, so in the middle of the session, so the session here, they meet in the beginning of the year for 3 months or so. And in the middle, and tort reform was the main show this year. And in the middle of it, one of the longtime, well-established trial lawyers here popped a $2.5 billion product liability. I think it was in some sort of rollover type case verdict.
Yeah.
So of course, boom, the headline, $2.5 billion. I'm sure, they're holding it up on the floor, I'm sure, when they're debating tort reform. But,
yeah, it's I hope I don't know. Somewhere I was looking at the specific law, so I don't really know what specific laws Georgia just passed. I'm sure people can work with them, and hopefully they're in Colorado. We still have, so for example, in Colorado, non-economic damages are capped, but we have this third category of impairment. So Colorado, I would say, is like a pretty decent place to practice, but it's not the wild, wild west where anything goes, no caps, and swing for the fences.
Yeah. Well, cool, Keith. This has been real fun, man. So I know you got to go. So for people that want to find you, I guess first plug your podcast again, and then if anybody has a case in Colorado and they need a trial lawyer, what's the best way to find you?
Well, the best way to find us is to call the force. So the 303 force, we are the force. But our URL is coloradoinjurylaw.com, which in hindsight I think was a mistake. So you mentioned mistakes. Like having a long URL, but I was like, but it's Colorado Injury Law. But now it's kind of a pain because my email is keith@coloradoinjurylaw.com. So if you could get just like a 2 or 3 letter, the shorter the URL, that would be my advice, having made the mistake of going the other way. I thought our URL would help us get cases, but I don't know. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But anyone can just call us on the podcast is the Colorado Trial Lawyer Connection. So it's on Spotify, everywhere. You just type in Colorado Trial Lawyer and it should pop up. Give it a listen. And I think it's fun because they're like real cases, and just like this, it's an hour, and you kind of hear a little bit about the lawyers, what they've been, and then you hear about the case, you hear about the verdict. And for me, it's very empowering, and it motivates me to want to go to battle in the courtroom, to go to trial.
Well, I'll tell you, I've always been the most entertained listening to trial lawyers talk about their stories from trial. There's always good stuff in there. So, I encourage everybody to go subscribe and listen to your podcast.
Thanks. I appreciate the plug.
Well, Keith, man, again, appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure, and I really appreciate what you're doing here, helping people grow their firms and helping the business side. It's critical.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.